if you want to just start out with, who are you? What are you doing right now?
Yeah.
And then what school did you go to? And then some of, what you work in right now, essentially.
Yeah. So, I'm Billy Lawton. So I'm a business analyst right now for the Bears, seasonal, I guess, not full time at this point. But so I guess before this, I was at U of I, did management and marketing for undergrad, then spent the last year doing a master's at Carnegie Mellon University in product and service innovation, I guess you would call it. So kind of took a little bit of a circuitous route to where I'm going right now. I didn't necessarily fully plan to get into the world of analytics. Like, as my first job after graduation, I was more aiming for like product management, sort of in that space, more on obviously the marketing side, not the technical side of product management for like a CPG company or something like that. But I just this opportunity just kind of came up, and I was interested in both sports. And then obviously it's in like a high demand technical area where you're building a lot of relatable skills that could serve me well regardless of where I end up wanting to go. So I figured at this point, given like what we had talked about earlier, sort of the lower opportunity cost of sort of starting out at kind of a lower rung than maybe you would expect potentially with a master's degree, I figured it was a good opportunity to get my foot in the door in an area that may end up being where I want to stay for the long haul.
Yeah. So just going back to, and we chatted earlier, but I guess just going back on what we were talking about, when you say lower opportunity costs, you're talking about basically taking on a job that may not pay shouldn't say pay, but like not even, may not be as ideal as some other opportunities that you might have, but there's so much in implicit, benefit.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, what those types of benefits are?
Yeah, definitely. I think just for me, I got like to land a similar role at a different company, like given my skill set at this point, to get like a similar job title and sort of like work opportunity. It wasn't going to be it requires kind of more experience generally for a similar role at a different company. So and it builds like in-demand skills and in an industry that I was interested in. So it was really the combination of like getting to an opportunity to work in sports, which is already kind of rare in itself, but also in an area that I'm not just picking any job in sports. Like, it's picking an area that's going to serve me with good skills that I'm leveraging my education in order to be of service to the company. So.
That makes sense, and I'm curious, what was that? As you said, it's incredibly competitive to get a job with a sports team. So what was that process? How did you differentiate yourself, and what would you recommend for somebody who's trying to get into there? What were some of the organizations that you joined? What were some of the things you did while in those organizations that allowed you to get those opportunities? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
For sure. I think the biggest thing is just, at least just in learning about sort of, I guess, like what they're looking for, as well as like what I'm looking for. It's like just doing some of those upfront networking conversations as early as you can, just because it really helps you not only learn what they're looking for, but you learn a lot about yourself along the way. Like, one of the biggest things that I learned was, I talked with like he was like a VP of technology for the Cubs. He's since moved on to a different company, but like the biggest thing that stuck out with me from a conversation with him is like what do you want your career to be? Do you want to be like potentially a leader in this space, or do you want to just like work in sports like anybody else sort of? So like, and that can involve having to take, different sort of job titles and working your way in, because he started out, like he worked at Accenture and then worked his way in, because he decided, he didn't want to just, have the job title of being in sports for the sake of being in sports. He decided, like, I wanted to be like, a leader, with like different skills that he developed in the sports space, and he kind of backed his way into it instead of just sort of taking the first like sports job that kind of came his way. So
and that's something. It's interesting you say that, because that's something that I think that some people don't realize can happen, is that he was mentioning to you, do you just want to be somebody else who's working in the space, or do you want to be a leader in that space? And in his case, he ended up working at Accenture and then backing into it by leveraging that experience at Accenture, which is a really notable consulting firm, and then using that to get into the sports field, because now it differentiates him, right? Maybe from people who had just started in there or who are coming from other backgrounds. Interestingly enough, let's say that you're somebody who starts in the sports space and then you want to back and use that to back into a different type of industry. It can go both ways, right?
Definitely.
It's not just leveraging some other experience to get into the space you want to, but maybe you're in a space that you don't actually enjoy as much, but you want to use that to get to the next space.
Because the biggest thing at the end of the day, too, and like in these interviews that I had with the Bears for my current position, the biggest thing is about skills. That's kind of king anywhere, but especially kind of in that space. The best way to highlight yourself, it's the networking in sports absolutely helps, like 100%, especially for just roles that like they don't do a lot of like external hiring in certain cases for different types of roles. But the biggest thing, at least especially for kind of the job I'm in like business analytics, the biggest thing they kind of want to see is like, like, do you sort of have an interest in sort of like a consumer face, like understanding the consumer, understanding the fan, because that's sort of what your everyday is in analytics. Like you're helping sort of the whole organization understand its fans better, helping drive, ROI for, different like teams better, just helping, to obviously drive the bottom line through understanding the customer. So showing that you have experience doing that through school projects or internships or what have you, that's really I think the thing that helped me the most in getting to where I currently am.
Got it. So that's how you were able to get to the point where
it
you
doesn't have
had
to be
the
sports
opportunity
specific. It was really about like the skills and sort of selling the that I'm very interested in understanding the consumer and sort of in that angle really, I think, really worked in my favor.
Right. And I am curious, a lot of that is kind of like the job description, what you're actually trying to achieve or what is involved in the role. I'm curious, do you have like an example or two of like things that you do on a day-to-day basis that like are really kind of illustrative or like really present what the kind of typical day-to-day is, that somebody who's interested in it but doesn't know exactly what you do day-to-day? What is that like? What is some of the things that you do without getting too specific into like kind of client-sensitive stuff?
Right, a lot of it's just, a lot of it is, at least what I'm doing, a lot of it's spreadsheet work kind of is sort of what it comes out to. It's a lot of working with numbers, identifying patterns, sort of like seeing like just different like brand metrics, whether it's like like ad awareness, just like purchase intent, just like different stuff about different companies.
So looking at maybe ad campaigns and then what the ROI is of
and proprietary databases that they have that they use to measure like different things about their fan bases, because they go through and get a lot of custom research done from different like boutique kind of market research companies in order to get like specific data on their fans, instead of just doing a lot of secondary stuff through Google or Google Scholar or just like more general databases. So a lot of it's just that ability to really like synthesize data down to like granular, like really important nuggets that is going to sell well in like in a sales meeting, or like it's supporting those other teams to basically help them do what they do better, essentially.
Got it. It's interesting because right now it's an interesting parallel. So in the UFC, right?
Yeah.
They're having this huge fight coming up, which is Masvidal versus Diaz.
Yeah.
And it's becoming this big hit, and Dana White has talked about there being a BMF belt, right? A bad MFer belt.
Yeah.
Which they were actually going to try to trademark, and then actually and I think they're going to try to sell that as like kind of replica belts as merchandise.
Yeah.
And I think that what happened was somebody who probably worked on their business analyst side said, wait a second, there is so much interest around these two. There's so much interest around this fight and the title of BMF that it may make sense for us to make this replica belt and even do it as a one-off, because there's just going to be so much demand. People are going to bring it to the actual events, whether it's the weigh-in or the warm-ups or the media scrums, and they're going to want to get it signed. And so they might have just made that decision based off of seeing the data and saying, wait a second, all of our best videos have are peaking with these two involved and around this idea of being a BMF.
Yeah.
And so to your points, that might be and I don't, without getting too specific about the databases you're using and the insights that you're seeing, it might be that you're finding some insights that allow you to make huge, create huge growth on the merchandise side or on the ticket selling side or on the, brand reputation side.
Right.
And that's kind of like, so I'm almost asking that as like, is that the type of stuff that you're looking for in the work you're doing?
Definitely, yeah. Like, because we don't obviously have like control from where I'm at and on the business side in terms of like dictating like the outcome or the product, like really on the field or the court or the arena, stuff like that. But I mean, a lot of like what I'm doing, I mean, it really kind of can determine like whether someone wants to like renew or not renew, like with sponsorships, or like re-up like season tickets and just stuff like that. And so like it really can have a big impact like down the line. Like in my role, obviously you're sort of more in a supporting role of other teams, and like they're sort of the front facing side and we're more kind of the back facing sort of internally. But like we have a really big role to take on in terms of like we have all this information, right? And it's that ability to like sort of see through the noise essentially and really pick out that granular nugget that's going to resonate not only with whoever in the organization that needs to present to a client or to what have you, but I totally lost my train of thought.
That's okay. So, and the other side of it too, and I think that you alluded to this, is that it's not just ticket sales, merchandise, etc. It's also, to your point, sponsorship. So you have to also figure out what is the thing that you're going to be able to use to actually convince somebody to re-up, to your point, re-up and actually sponsor another year of the Bears, or be able to do a premium sponsorship versus maybe a regular sponsorship.
Because you're asking them to put a lot of money on the line, and it's sort of like they want to know like what am I likely to get out of putting all this money down. So that's really the biggest thing. We're showing them like you should put down this amount of money because you're going to get this amount of return on it. That's sort of the bottom line of like the end result, ideally, of what what we're doing essentially.
That makes sense. You were mentioning when we were chatting earlier. You mentioned being a part of ISBC.
Yeah.
First of all, what is ISBC, and then how did you find out about it? What were you doing within it to kind of create more opportunity for yourself and eventually potentially get a role within with a sports team, which ended up happening? Can you just talk a little bit about that organization and U of I organizations, or just your experience at U of I?
Yeah, it was kind of a new thing. I remember, I think around like my sophomore year at U of I was kind of its first year. It sort of started out as just like basically a conference that they started advertising around like campus and stuff, kind of a collaboration between the College of Business and the Recreation, Sport, and Tourism program. So I kind of just went to it kind of like on a whim because I was interested in sports, but it was basically just taking my like one step and I guess the hypothetical right direction. I sort of saw like a flyer around campus saying like there's all these sports organizations that are going to come and present, their former alums, that sort of thing. So I was like, for sure, like I'll go and check this out. I mean, what else am I doing on a Friday at noon? Like probably nothing, right? So, but no, it was it was just cool to like sort of get at least from an outsider's perspective, sort of a first look at like. Because they were in all different sorts of organizations across different sports, across different roles. Some of them are in ticket sales, some are in activation, some are in marketing, and they all sort of do different things. They sort of give their different talk of their career journey. So that was sort of where I kind of got my first sort of foot.
Did any of them stand out that when you heard it you were like, yes, I want to go into that field, or I want to go and work for that organization? Or was it just a general, this is actually an industry that interests me, I just want to go and figure out, is this something that I want to do, so therefore I want to go and get my foot in the door by starting out?
I think for me it was kind of the diversity of perspectives, like specifically kind of like a majority of them were kind of in the sales and like sponsorship sort of side, which didn't particularly like speak to me, just given like what I was doing like with my education versus what this was. It just didn't seem like a good fit, and given what I wanted my career to be like, I sort of I didn't want to be, a lot of that just seems very industry specific in terms of the skills you're working on, and I'm just sort of my thought process was like I didn't want to, I guess, pigeonhole myself into like going down that route and basically being limited in that way. So I was looking for more opportunities that kind of would leverage what I was doing in the classroom and through internships and stuff like that in a sports situation with similar roles and responsibilities and that sort of thing.
Well, speaking of the classroom, you started at U of I, and so do you want to talk a little bit about what that experience was like and some of the things that you learned? Was it more like classroom stuff that actually helped you, actual education? Was it some of the experiences outside of it? Was it the organizations? I know you talked about ISBC, but in general, how U of I was, and then we can move into kind of what you did after U of I, which I think might be really interesting to some people who are interested in going to a school like that and understanding a program like that. But first, let's start with U of I. What was that experience like? What were some of the things that stood out for you?
Yeah, I think I think like anyone else, when you're initially applying to college, if we're going to take it way back to that point, I think it was just like the amount of, I guess, networking opportunities and the connections not only to Chicago but other like St. Louis, Indianapolis, Nashville, just things like that. The amount of like recruiting bases that all recruit from U of I, along with it just being like a world class like top tier business school, like really kind of drew me there. And then I kind of like everyone else just kind of went down the path of I thought maybe like finance, sort of a more like something that is sort of like I guess more like a renowned U of I specialty. Like
and to what we talked about earlier, the value versus what you're getting out of it compared to other schools.
Right.
So basically what we were talking about was that, look, U of I is a really, really good school, considering that if you're an in-state student, the kind of ROI of the amount that you're putting into tuition versus what you're getting out of it.
Right.
There's a debate now, I think, really about that ROI, because I think it's getting pretty high up there.
Yeah.
But I think that for us at the time, it made sense.
Yeah.
The other aspect is what you did after, and do you want to talk a little bit about where you went, and then specifically what you did within that program? which I think could be really interesting to some people.
Yeah, so my master's program is obviously very kind of like consumer-facing, consumer-centric, really heavy on kind of sort of figuring out what drives innovation, both from not only a business perspective, but engineering and design, how all those things can I guess, intersect to create, unique, innovative products. But I sort of got an interest in that from taking a new product innovation course as a part of my marketing curriculum at U of I, and doing a semester of like kind of consumer research for the professor in that class, just because I was really interested in his class and him as a professor. So I spent a semester doing that before I looked into this program and sort of thought this is a really good way to stand out if I want to get sort of involved in product management, CPG, just a more kind of consumer facing.
And who is the professor?
Ravi Mehta.
Oh, okay, I heard.
Yeah, he's a marketing professor.
Yeah.
So he did a lot of just interesting kind of consumer psychology type of research. So I helped facilitate some of those studies and stuff like that for a semester, which was really interesting, just kind of to see more of the front side of kind of what innovation looks like, essentially, because a lot of what drew me to it just through other internships too was a lot of innovation that's happening now. It's not happening in R&D at the corporate level. It's happening at universities, top tier research universities like U of I. So
what do you mean by that? What is an example of where?
Just a lot of like the research park at U of I. Like a lot of companies are saying, like they're like it takes so much time and resources out of them to fund R&D when universities are producing so much quality content. They're just like, and there's top minds, in engineering and business and everything that's already housed at U of I. So they're essentially just, they're just going directly to the source, and they're like, this is basically going to be our incubator. So just a lot of, especially in tech specifically too, just in what I've seen from some of the consulting internships that I did earlier on, just a lot of that is happening at top tier research universities. A lot of sort of the, big time innovations that have come out in the last 15 to 20 years are coming out of those spaces. So just to kind of see, just from a pure research perspective, like sort of how that process goes and sort of how that whole thing comes about, I thought was really interesting.
And that's interesting because, if you're paying somebody in R&D who's going full time, it's going to be significantly higher. So you're going to have to do salaries, benefits, etc.
Right.
Versus if you can grab a student who's already working at it, who's interested in like being at the cutting edge and understanding what's going on, not only is it going to be cheaper, but that person's going to be way more motivated. They're not just doing it to keep themselves afloat, but they're doing it because they actually love it. Otherwise, they just go and do something else on campus, or they build their own thing.
Absolutely.
So I think that's fascinating that they're creating a little incubator, within.
Well, I think you can especially appreciate that given the accelerator stuff that you did at UI as well. So I think you have a unique appreciation for that yourself.
Definitely. I do think that the best time to try something like that out is to do it while you're in college or before you go full time.
Yeah.
Because even if the thing doesn't work out, and in this case for me it didn't, for a multitude of reasons, the reality is the amount of learning that I got and understanding how a business works, and moreover the pitfalls that you can run into and the traps you can run into is incredibly valuable for right now and trying to make things happen within my full-time role. Right, there are things that I'm seeing now as opportunities in the market that are not necessarily something that I would have seen without the experience of pursuing something, that was its own startup, its own business. And I'm trying to give like a specific example. It's this whole space with young professionals, right?
Yeah.
It's the idea that right now there's nothing out there that is actually providing insight as to what's going on day to day for somebody like us who's working in it right now and can give and has empathy for somebody who's in college, who's in high school, or who's just getting out of college and trying to figure out what they want to do with their life, or they've decided what they want to do, they think they know it, then they find out, wait a second, there's so much other stuff out there, but I have no idea what it actually involves.
Right.
I just have this like high level job description, which the reality is a job description isn't telling you what actually goes into that role. And that's part of the reason why I ask people, what do you do day to day versus, what is the industry known for? Because it's very it typically can be very different.
Right, right, absolutely.
I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? And
yeah, definitely. I think the biggest pitfall, at least from just my experience in the last year, job searching before I landed this specific role, like in just doing other reading on just sort of, I guess, how the job hunt goes for other people too, is, job posts are just meant to be generic, pretty boilerplate, just give you a feel for like what the responsibilities might be, but they don't give you a feel for what the culture is, and even if you think you like the responsibilities, you don't really know until you're in it, in the trenches day to day. So I mean, it's just very it can be very like deceiving potentially with certain job posts because you just don't always know what you're getting.
Well, and you know, we discussed this earlier, and I was, you know, getting really, you know, passionate about it, which is that the reality is that there is a fundamental disconnect between what the actual jobs are when people come out of college and what they study.
Yeah.
We are telling kids, why don't you invest 120 to 150K in an education?
Yeah.
And then from there, you'll get out of college and you're going to do this job that you've been, you know, you've researched, but you don't necessarily know what goes into it.
Yeah.
And then we're surprised when they have a quarter life crisis, or when they, in a year or year and a half, reevaluate and say, I can't stay here anymore.
Yeah.
And the reality is that there's just nothing out there right now that's providing education, insight, actual practical knowledge on what a young professional does in different fields.
Yeah.
And that's why it's such a giant white space. It's not just for, you know, in the case of you, sports marketing or business analyst or working with a sports team. That's its own space within the whole white space.
Yeah.
A forensic forensic accountants within accounting space, within financial services, within, you know, an accounting firm, you know, doing you know, working with specifically in the niche of insurance. That's its own white space.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing out there right now. If I go and search up young professional, I might find myself. Like that's, and I'm not saying that like in a boasting, you know, pandering, like trying to peacock way. It's just saying how much opportunity there is, not just for you and me, but for everyone.
Yeah.
If they want to share that, you know, they're a product management person. If there's somebody who wants to share that they work within agile, if there's somebody who shares that they want to work in manufacturing and they want to show what that is day to day, I think that's so incredibly valuable to that kid in high school who doesn't know what they want to do, to that person coming out of college who's, you know, debating which career they want to go into. You know, I think that there's such a white space here that is so open to everybody. Yeah. It's just a matter of, are people going to execute? Are people going to not be so narrowly focused on, like, it's good to be focused on your career. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying that you have the ability to provide insight and actual impact on people and show them what it's like. Why don't you take a little bit of time to just give that reflection at the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of the month and say, this is what I did wrong. This is what I think, you know, people might want to know if they're going into the job. Not necessarily bad things, but maybe just things that you didn't know. And now you know it. And now that's somebody who knows it for when they go into their career, and how thankful they're going to be and how you're going to probably see something when they say, hey, you know, I had no idea about this thing. I'm so glad that you gave me the heads up. And now I knew, and I didn't make that same mistake, and it made me look really good. And it made me feel really good, and I really appreciate that.
Right.
You know, that happens. That's a real thing. And I think that's what's going to happen if people take advantage of this opportunity, which is that there's a huge white space for young professionals, and there's a huge white space for the thing that you do. Why not put something out there?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
After that, you know, I didn't think that was going to go into such a rant, but, you know, we were talking about this earlier, and it's something that I think is really important. Moving back onto, you know, you finished up U of I, and then you went to Carnegie Mellon. What was the difference in the environment? Can you kind of compare and contrast and you know, tell us a little bit about like what that was like? Because U of I, you know, I think that it's no secret that it's kind of known for a work hard, play hard culture. Yeah. And Carnegie Mellon, from what I've heard, because I haven't experienced it, and that's why I'm really interested to get your opinion. You know, what is the difference between, you know, a work hard, play hard culture and then Carnegie Mellon, which is kind of known for being, you know, a pretty prestigious school?
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's basically the difference between work hard, play hard, and just working hard and play is not
as much.
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of, if you're the type of person that sort of just, you know, you don't necessarily really feel like you want to be a part of the party atmosphere, that sort of thing. I mean, they're really just, it's much more academically driven. The party environment just isn't as great. Like, obviously the fraternity, sorority, like, culture there, and just like sort of the layout of the campus in terms of bars and just that sort of thing. It's just a lot smaller school for one thing, and then just the layout is more just kind of purely on the school end. I mean, you definitely have your opportunities because it sits right next to the University of Pittsburgh campus, which obviously being a bigger school, and it kind of has more of that atmosphere. So it's definitely still there if you want to like partake in that. There's still plenty of opportunity to do that. I found people that were interested in doing that like outside of school hours, and just, you know, just so I kind of was able to still find it, but it wasn't as often. It was just not as commonplace as
it wasn't as it wasn't as epidemic around the entire environment.
Definitely, absolutely.
I am curious, you know, now that, did you do any internships before going full time and before going to Carnegie?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I worked actually at remotely as like a game design and marketing intern for like a startup out of MIT over
Okay.
last summer. So
Oh, wow,
it was
okay.
it was a lot of like kind of like research related to like game development and just sort of how to basically tailor the positioning of the product to like be potentially like an education gaming sort of thing. So I was doing
okay.
a lot of research on the education gaming space, helping them understand like who the key stakeholders were, whether it's a superintendent of a school district or a principal, or how much influence teachers have on the curriculum decisions and stuff like that.
Oh, that's
and then,
fascinating.
And then also just like the general size of the overall market, just finding general industry-wide statistics. So
I feel like that's incredibly valuable experience because now okay, well, when I go and do that research, so that I know that research, how to do that research for the education space.
Yeah.
It's not that you now know how the sports space works.
Yeah.
But now you know what that process is.
Yeah.
Of what you have to research.
Right.
And why it's important.
Right.
To understand now how to apply that same process to sports marketing.
Yeah.
Which then gives you a unique advantage to all of your peers and all the people who are competing with you for the same positions or the
Right.
same opportunities. So I think that's another thing that I think, to our point talking about like working in a startup, you get so many like, and this really does come down a little bit to, what's your ambition and how much do you actually want to learn versus what's your execution, right? You can say that you want to build the biggest startup or have the biggest impact in your role, but the reality is the delta and the variable is your execution of that ambition.
Right.
And so in your case, right, you went out and you really tried to figure out who the key stakeholders were, how that curriculum affected it. You can apply that same process now to sports marketing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's incredibly valuable and something that somebody who's about to be a young professional or who's a college undergrad or who's a high schooler might want to know is that even if you aren't successful in that startup or if you're not successful in that internship position, you learn things that you can now apply and
Right.
be incredibly exponentially more successful because
Absolutely.
you had that experience of failure and trying to learn it
Yeah.
versus somebody who may have had it easy,
Yeah.
right? In that they didn't have to fail, and now when they reach adversity in
Yeah.
their full-time role, they don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And you've learned how to cope with it because you're the one who actually went through and did that.
Yeah,
Back in the internship.
Yeah. Not only that too, like in my grad program too, with just working with people from different backgrounds and on like similar projects where it's essentially a startup type environment. You're trying to build something from the ground up over the course of a semester. You really do have to kind of like the biggest thing too, especially in a startup environment, is just being able to work with people who think differently from you and just kind of trying to work through those struggles. It's definitely something that like I came to appreciate over the last essentially year, just between that internship and through grad school, just sort of pushing through all those challenges of trying to make something cool and innovative.
Right.
You hear all the buzzwords and everything, like once something's successful, but until you're living the day to day of like what it's like to be just trying to like build something, it's really hard, and you only hear the success stories.
How about to your point? I think
Yeah.
what do you think about this statement? Entrepreneurship is romantic to people who haven't actually executed on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
Because once
it sounds great.
Yes, and it's something that people like to put in their in their profile or in their resumes.
Yeah.
But the reality is that once you actually get down to doing, and by the way, like I love that part of it where it's hard because then I'm learning so much more
Right.
than if it was easy or if it just kind of came into your lap.
Yeah.
Do you think that entrepreneurship is something that you want to pursue later on in your career after you've kind of gotten some years under your belt and some experience, or is it something that it was a good thing when you were doing it, but now you want to focus on the corporate world? Kind of which and it doesn't necessarily be that you have to be one or the other, but
Yeah.
I'm curious, where do you see yourself in those two?
At least
frameworks?
right now, I think the biggest thing for me is like adjusting to like obviously like the work world, just sort of learning where my niche is really, and sort of. But if there ever came a time where if I say like I don't know, if you and me happened to come up with just some
Right.
amazing outstanding idea that just like we both were super invested in and we both wanted to see like how it that we really were like believed in that we could make it work.
Yeah.
I 100% like would be I think confident in taking that dive
Right.
if that point ever came along. It's not something I would necessarily I guess like be searching for like at the outset, but like I would always be open to it and always something that I would consider in the future if just the opportunity was there.
Presented itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Now that you've kind of graduated and you've started working at full time in the city and then in the burbs as well, what are some of the things that you either were obstacles or things that you just straight up learned that you didn't realize coming out of college that you think would be incredibly helpful for somebody who's still in college but doesn't know what the real world is like?
Yeah, I think the biggest adjustment, at least just from my humble experience at this point, I think the biggest adjustment's just the 9 to 5 from coming from college where you're doing odd hours all the time and just,
I mean the amount I don't nap anymore.
Exactly. So you realize how long the day can really be when you're not waking up at noon or 1 or 2 p.m. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So and just the. I guess just working within kind of an organizational structure and just sort of like learning sort of how to adapt to like whatever the culture is wherever you're working, and just sort of how to work with different people, just because you have to work with people who've been there for maybe only a few months to 10 to 20 years, maybe even more depending on where you're working.
Do you see generational differences sometimes between you trying to report to somebody who's maybe 20 years your senior, but then versus somebody who's 5 years your senior? Do you feel like there's big differences there? And if so, what is the way that you try to navigate that? Are you just trying to kind of always... I'll let you answer. How are you trying to kind of navigate those waters?
Yeah, I think a lot of... it kind of depends on a lot of my role, I guess, specifically is sort of very individually driven, I guess, at this point. So a lot of... I kind of try to more, I guess, like for just kind of everyday, just sort of stuff that I'm doing, I would tend to sort of seek out more junior level people who kind of have, I guess, been there more recently and it's still sort of a part of their day to day versus like obviously my boss who has like, a million things going on.
And that kind of leans back to the whole point of like the young professional space, right? Is that there's nothing out there for people who are really, who have just like literally just been through it within 1 to 2 years, or who are going through it right now, because that's the type of stuff where you'd say, okay, well, I can't go, because the people who are, and we talked about this a little bit in a previous discussion, is that, the people who then, who may be creating the educational systems that are then implemented in an organization may be way too removed, aka they're 15 to 20 years, into their career, and they may not even remember what it was like to be an associate starting out. They may like think in their head, oh, this is what it was like, but the reality is it's been so long, and the environment and the market is so different, right? 15 to 20 years ago, I mean, we didn't even have cell phones, or maybe we were just having like the early cell phones. I'm not sure on the date. So, but my point is that it's just a completely different, it's a completely different ballgame. It's for a sports reference, because you're not really being empathetic because you can't be. Like, I wouldn't expect somebody who is so far removed in their career to understand what it's like to be a young professional again. At the same time, I wouldn't expect a young professional to understand what it's like to be a manager because they haven't experienced it. So it's the same, like, you can look at it both ways, right?
Definitely.
Like, I'm going to be much more, I'm going to trust much more the opinion of somebody who's 35 to 40, who's 15 to 20 years in their career, and, is in maybe like a manager, senior manager, or like or managing director role, right? They may know way more about that role than me going and asking a young professional, like, what do they know, right? Of doing that type of role. And I feel like it's the same thing. It just doesn't feel like it because they've actually experienced it. But the reality is there's just such a big gap in that, and when they were going through it day to day, that I'm not sure that advice, there still may be valuable advice, but it may not be as valuable as somebody who's going through it. So that's why, and I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but you get what I mean.
I think that's a bit, I think it's still definitely like helpful just to, like, for people that are in a position you're aspiring to be in, like, talk to those people and just sort of see, like, maybe get a feel for like what they recall about their journey and sort of key inflection moments.
I'm not saying don't go to people and get an understanding of what their careers were like, because you'll get so many insights from that. I'm just saying, if you're trying to find out what it's actually like how it feels, and what are some of the mistakes that can really be made, from a technical standpoint as well. I don't know if that's necessarily the best resource.
No, for sure.
Or if that resource even exists yet, right? Which is why we're doing this. So, I
think the biggest thing is just, just reaching out to people in general, but just taking sort of, because there's multiple ways you can get to, I'm a testament of that. Like, the way I got into sports is very unconventional, just generally, and everyone takes their own path. So just listening and learning from people, just, listen to them, see what really sticks in the back of your mind a day or two later, and then just sort of, try to build that into what you're doing in terms of your career path.
And you said unconventional way. We were discussing kind of cold emailing as being one path. But what were some of, like, if you could pick 3 to 5 things, right, that you would put in your cold emails that you would recommend that somebody do today if they want to go and get opportunities in the sports marketing space? what would be some of those recommendations? What are some of those tips that you learned the hard way, so to speak?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just always making sure you're first of all, like, don't ask some person for a job, because that's not what LinkedIn is. Like, LinkedIn cold emailing is for. Obviously, it has the job tab you can apply for, but in just reaching out to somebody, the biggest thing is keep the focus on, like, wanting to start a conversation, learn more about them, their career, that sort of thing, and just sort of only, like, at least at the outset, only just giving sort of a brief description of, like, you're like, you want to, you're like an aspiring, so-and-so product manager or marketing manager, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I would love to learn more about your experience at XY company,
Mm-hmm.
just stuff like that, because people are very, receptive to, especially like students, like people are very, especially if you went to the same university as them, people are very receptive to wanting to, give the insights about their career and how they got where they got. So they're always willing to, offer that sort of, the sort of the foot in the door sort of thing, in terms of just helping you learn and sort of figure out, like, what you want in terms of how to position yourself on a resume and in an interview, and just sort of learning more about, like, the types of roles you even want to pursue.
This is in the same light of kind of cold meeting somebody, but it's outside of the email framework. Some career fairs, right?
Yeah.
I think that one of the biggest hacks that I figured out on my own, and it was just from trial and error of experiencing and going through 8 career, or I think it ended up being 6 or 7 career fairs, because once I had the full-time offer with BDO, I didn't end up going to the career fair, the 1 or 2 career fairs during my master's or senior year. But the most fundamental question that allowed me to have the most opportunity was, I would ask that person, let me paint the picture for you. Everybody coming in there, and they're like robots. They give the resume, and then they say, "Hi, my name is XY. My name is X. Yeah. I'm a Y student, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, master student. I've worked here, here, and here. What opportunities do you have?" Right? Like that kind of robotic interaction. Yeah. And so what I would do is I would try to make it as an organic of an interaction as possible. And the best way that I did that was I would ask them, "How was your trip down here?"
Yeah.
It was that simple question, and framing it in a way where it's almost nonchalant, and not like you don't care, but like nonchalant in that, like, we're having a conversation, you're meeting me, I'm meeting you.
Yeah.
It's not about, me being a robot and telling you exactly what jobs I'm looking for, because I know I'm already here for that.
Yeah.
So why don't we just have a conversation, I get to know you a little bit better, so I can figure out, is this culture right for me, and am I the right person for your culture?
Right, absolutely, definitely.
So I think that's one hack that people can really do, is just go up to them and actually try to make an organic interaction. You can steal that line, like, go and ask them, like, how was your trip down here? They're going to say, man, it sucked. There was 6 hours of traffic to get to a 3 hour, typically it's 2 hours, 40 minutes to get to U of I, and, that's if you're not speeding.
Yeah.
Took us 6 hours. Thanks for asking. It was it was an awful trip.
Yeah.
But at least, you're the first person, I've had so many responses to that that have led to really genuine, good conversations that I don't think I would have had without using that.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything from career fairs that you can remember that you used? I know that it's one of those things that, it's tough to differentiate, because everybody's doing the same thing. We're all there for the same reason.
Right.
But
I think definitely any way you can try to, because I know in going to career fair myself, especially as a natural introvert myself, and I kind of had those painful experiences, especially early on, just sort of.
And I did too. I'm saying, I learned the hard way, to get to that point where I was like, oh yeah, okay, but sorry, go ahead.
Just kind of like feeling that pressure of really, like, you just need to, like, do whatever you can to kind of diffuse that sort of internal pressure that can build up in a situation like that, where it's already a super competitive environment.
And you made me think of the next thing, which is that if they have, like, a pin on, or if they have, or if they're wearing, like, a special, like a anything you can find. If you see like their bag has a sticker on it, or like their laptop has a sticker on it that they're using, and you're like, oh wait, you're a fan of the St. Louis Cardinals? I didn't know there was any Cardinals fans. It's everybody's a Cubs or White Sox fan.
Right.
And then now all of a sudden you're talking about sports versus trying to talk about something that the jobs, which is like I think is kind of like the easiest way to just get this is the jobs that we have open. Nice meeting you. Here's my card. Right. Instead of like you love this team. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So I think that's good advice for career fairs. Anything else that you can think of that you think would be valuable to somebody who's maybe an undergrad or a high school senior, or somebody who's just out of college, maybe wants to get into sports marketing?
I would say the biggest thing, at least for me, is just, especially for someone like me who honestly I'm still not sure long term, where I want to go, what I want to be doing, especially during undergrad, just especially in summers with internships, all those summers that you have, like don't feel the pressure to like take like a path where like you work at the same company and then just take like I know that's like kind of the safe play that a lot of people kind of subscribe to, but I think you're doing yourself a bit of a disservice in that you can take all those summers to kind of like do different jobs and sort of learn different things. Like 2 years ago, like I did like a social media internship where I got to do a lot of like Twitter posts and media copies. Just I was like basically writing about stuff I was passionate about sports again. So
nice.
So like it was just like something that I like think back to, and like even now like I'm still thinking like like I kind of really like that creative angle. What in my day-to-day job, how can I sort of institute those skills to kind of benefit my day-to-day job with data? Like it might come up in the storytelling that I'm maybe doing like with the data that I'm analyzing on any given week. But I think the biggest thing with college and in the job search and internship search too is just always continue like learning more about yourself, take a chance on opportunities that maybe feel not quite as safe, and just because I think ultimately you'll get where you're meant to go, and it'll be because you took those chances and learned what really is your path that you won't get by being safe, quote unquote, in college.
I think that was fantastic advice. Yeah. Hey, I don't really have much else, so if I really appreciate you taking the time. I think that was incredibly beneficial.
Yeah.
What'd you think? Did you feel good?
Yeah, no, it was good. A lot of it's a good reflection and stuff that maybe you think about but you don't fully articulate it. It's something that you maybe just think about in passing when things happen, but it helps put everything in perspective a little bit in terms of where I've been, where I want to go.
I really liked your parting words. Like I thought that was actually incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of people will end up choosing to go a route of like this big corporation or this big tech company.
Yeah.
But in reality, like deep down, they know that they want to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
But they chose that other one because either their parents or their friends were going there.
Right.
And they said, shit, if they're doing that, I should go too.
Yeah.
Like I got to do what.
There's a ton of peer pressure with it.
It is, and I think that if there's one piece of advice that is incredibly valuable, is that if you follow your peers, you will get the same benefits and rewards that come with that. And the reality is,
it may not be for you.
It may not be for you. It may be the same. It may be like the same result, which is that you just end up working. I say go and try that other thing because you may find out that you love it, you're passionate about it, and you're better than everybody else in the industry because you actually are going to be happy to spend that at 50, 60, 70 hours a week.
That's the biggest thing.
And you're going to excel where if you had gone to that other job, you would have done 40 hours a week, been miserable, been praying for that clock to hit 5 o'clock on a Friday so that you can get out of there and go to your escapism during the weekend. So, to that point, I think that finding what you it may not even be what you're passionate or what you love because you don't know, like I don't know that about, I love the impact that my job is, right? But I don't know if I necessarily want to do it for the rest of my life. I think that the expectation that a 23, 24, 25-year-old or a 22-year-old is going to know that is bonkers. I mean, that's just out of this world, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And third of all, going and trying out that thing could end up being the spark that makes you have extraordinary results.
Right.
Because you've decided to do something that's more along your passion rather than what your parents wanted you to do, what your friends wanted you to do, what they did, what your girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever, it is, might want you to do. So I thought that was really valuable. So
absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for taking the time, man. That was really awesome.
Anytime, dude.
Yeah.
I'm always down.
For that. I mean, the point that you made about, like, I still don't know if this is the right thing for me in this space. Like, that point, that was, like, that's exactly the whole thing. That's why the young professional space is such a white space, because nobody expects you to know it. And the other side of it, too, is that there's going to be people who are, like, 20, 30, 40 years into their career, maybe C-suite, right? They're going to get insights about young professionals that they would have never had before. Which means that you're not only providing value to people who are in high school, going into college going into young professionals who are still figuring it out, but also every level above because they don't know how an associate or a senior associate thinks, and it changes from each generation, right? Millennial is different from Gen Y, Gen X, so it's giving insights to like the entire vertical of people who are in different positions and in different industries, right? Like somebody might be an accountant at an accounting firm, but and they're putting out one of these like young professional videos, but then there might be like a financial services person who like needs help with some accounting services, and now you're creating an opportunity just by telling your story, regardless of whether or not it's gonna work out, or if it's accurate, or if it's you being an expert in your space, which nobody expects that, but they might see that and it creates a business development opportunity for you to be able to sell work, right? So the reason why I'm telling people like this is such a white space, and it's for each of your own niches of what you're doing right now, is because there's benefit to every person in the ecosystem, not just that high school senior who's going to end up graduating, but also that C-suite executive who has no idea how a young professional thinks, and they're having turnover issues, right? Like for example, in the accounting world, I've seen that there's been a lot more turnover than even typically from what I've seen in the past, at least from my research. And I believe a lot of that has to do with the fact that the internet has now reached scale. In other words, what I think is happening is that kids with not just Glassdoor, but also just having the internet and being able to reach out to people through Reddit, through other social media functions, are figuring out that, wait a second, I don't have to kill myself to make this 80, 90 hour week into the tax deadline or the audit deadline. I don't have to do that. I can go and work like a regular financial services job and not have to put myself through that. Same thing with investment banking. I'm seeing that same trend. It's that kids are getting burnt out, and then they're realizing, wait a second, I don't know if I necessarily want to keep doing this. It happened in the past, but now there's internet at scale, so more people are seeing it, and they're seeing it sooner in their careers, and I think that that's going to create a potential not downfall, but a potential issue, a huge issue, right? For these audit and tax practices who need to have associates and senior associates that work those hours, but they're running out of the supply, right?
Yeah.
They're all going elsewhere because they're realizing, wait a second, I don't have to do this anymore. I think that that's going to be a thing that's going to sneak up on the accounting industry, and I'll be very interested in how it plays out. The one thing, the saving grace might be a financial meltdown. And I say that, it's funny, right? Like, yeah. Why would an accounting firm or a financial services firm wish for a meltdown? And I think the reason why is because then people who are young professionals who are going into other jobs or quitting their jobs and trying to do their own thing are going to be like, wait a second, I might struggle to find a job. I don't know if I can actually make this side hustle or this entrepreneur thing work.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back and get that job, or I'm going to stay, or people are going to stay within those, roles where they're kind of burning out a little bit because they're like, wait a second, people are struggling to get jobs. I need to be able to support myself and pay rent.
Right.
I may stay in this. So I think that might be the saving grace. But if there's no financial meltdown and you're starting to lose the supply of the associates and senior associates working in your practice to be able to go through those busy seasons, that might create an issue in the ecosystem. So
it could potentially be a good thing though for them it would cause them to instigate them to change so that they could, get, reduce the turnover issues because they could change the work situation, just give people reasons to stay instead of giving them reasons to leave.
Yes.
To a degree, anyway. I know the hours are long, and that's just the nature of the job.
But I thought the same. I mean, that's like a reasonable thing to think.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I don't know this for a fact, but like from talking to people at different firms, right? Both Big Four and outside of the Big Four. From talking to them, it seems like their managers and senior managers still think that this is it's the norm technically, because it always happens. There's always that turnover of kids who get burnt out and don't want to keep working. The problem is that I think that they think it's typical, and the reality is it's not as typical as it was because now there's internet at scale. People are seeing this in the masses, right? Seeing this happen, and so it's different. And by the time that they recognize that trend, my concern is that it'll already be too late. People will be like, tax or audit, screw that. I'm not going to put myself through something like that. And I don't know if the same thing's going to happen with investment banking because I don't know that industry as well. I don't have as much ground level data, but I'm also seeing the early signs of that too. I don't know if it's going to happen. I think that a financial meltdown is going to be a huge incentive for people to stay in those jobs. But if a financial meltdown doesn't happen and they keep losing the supply of these kids, what are they going to do?
Yeah. It's a strong question.
So.
Got to give people a rewarding and livable situation. People aren't willing to sacrifice the work-life balance.
Yeah. Okay, let me shut this thing off. I feel like one more thing. So what I was saying was that I'm putting out these videos, right? And I'm lucky that I'm getting DMs, and they're like, "Hey, this really helped me." I actually found that incredibly interesting. I didn't know that specific job is what people what that job actually meant and what people do. For example, technology risk is something where it's basically IT. It's basically the audit version, the accounting world audit version of IT, right? And figuring out, hey, is this password actually correct? Do people have the right authority, etc.? But my point is that I put out videos and gotten those DMs where it's been like really good and I've gotten a lot of feedback. I've also put them out where I've literally gotten almost nothing. And I'm telling you, I feel good about those DMs, but I feel just as good about the thing that gets no views. Because I know that in the long term, in that 20, 30, 40 year long run vision, that just doing it and having things on record of people in these specific roles is going to be so valuable in its whole, the sum of its parts, rather than just individually, as well as just the fact that I feel good about putting it out there. Like, this is the truth. Like, it's not like we're manufacturing our experience. Like, this is just us talking about our experiences as young professionals to help out people who are that high school senior who's trying to figure it out, or that undergrad who just doesn't know what they want to do, and they have no resource to find out, what is that thing that people are doing right now within that specific field. Definitely. The moral of the story is that, like, both of them feel the exact same way to me. Like, I feel really good about the one that gets no view, like, that gets, like, however many views and no interactions, no likes, to the one where I'm getting DMs from people who are saying, wow, that was really helpful. I wasn't sure about, like, doing this side thing, and now I kind of want to go and try it because I'm seeing somebody who was successful with it, and then they turned their side hustle into their full time when they were in a position to be able to do it, right? Or they moved in that corporate role and they weren't sure about it because their parents said, hey, I want, you should be going and being a doctor, or you should go and be an accountant, you should go and be a lawyer. But then I saw somebody who looks just like me and has the same background as me, and they were able to do it. So now I want to go and try it because I actually love doing that, and I hate doing this thing. But I'm being forced to do that thing, and I actually want to go and pursue that thing. And because that person actually showed me that they did it, fuck yeah, I want to do it. So.
Damn right.
Okay. All right. I promise.
No worries, man.
I think that doing these types of interviews, because this is literally, like we said before, this is something that we would have done anyway. We would have done dinner, we would have caught up, we would have talked about stuff that were, like, fundamentally really helpful insights that nobody would find out about. Like, not that nobody would find out about, that there are people who do not have that same opportunity because they're maybe introverted or they don't have as wide of a network.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, that's the whole point here, is that, like, I'm lucky that I have a network, you have friends, and, we're friends. We're trying to leverage our networks to be able to say, hey, this is the stuff that we're learning from each other.
Yeah.
Why are we holding that to ourselves? Everybody should have that knowledge and be able to know what's going on. And then whoever executes best should be the person who's actually able to go and get the benefits and the fruits of that labor.
Yeah.
The reality is that because you and I were afforded, some privileges and luxuries of being able to go to a great school, we worked hard, and we, put ourselves in a position to get those opportunities. But the reality is that we did have some innate privileges of being able to be in that position. And so why are we getting that, not imparting, some of the same knowledge that we're learning and that we've learned to be able to give everybody that opportunity, so whoever executes best actually gets the, to my point, fruits of the labor, and it's a meritocracy, right? That the people who actually have the merit to do well and achieved it actually get the benefits. What was I saying earlier? Oh, so when I'm interviewing people, right? Like, or when I'm chatting with people, as I would, like, if it was a dinner or a lunch, it's actually making me more comfortable talking in front of a camera than it was, 5 months ago or a year ago.
Yeah.
And I also care less about how it's going to come out because, worst case scenario, I can edit it, but the reality is I'll probably just put out the raw footage, right? Because it's just, I know that that's my truth. I know that I feel good about putting that out there, but it's just the action of doing it. It's practice. And you know how you shoot a ball and it's, like, so awkward that first time.
Yeah.
Right? Or if you're writing cursive, right? It's so hard that first time. You're looking at every letter and figuring it out, how to write it, versus doing it so much that now you're just going at it, or you're shooting the ball so careless, so freely that it doesn't affect you anymore. I think that's exactly what's going on with me talking on these interviews. And I think it's actually going to get easier because I'm doing more videos. So it's like practice makes perfect, but in this case, practice is just making it happen, period.
Yeah.
Right? It's just making it way easier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right. Okay.
That's fine.
So what we were just talking about was that, what were we just talking about? Oh, that somebody was coming up to me and they were saying, I articulated to them that this is a white space because there's so many kids who don't know what they want to do.
Yeah.
But if they had some resource to look at and get insights of what's actually going on in the real world of all of the young professionals in the different industries, in the different specific jobs within those industries, then there's gonna be such an upside for everybody who actually contributes to that space. And they're like, David, why are you telling everybody? Like, why don't you keep that to yourself, execute on it, and then go and reap all the benefits without getting other people? And I'm like, and to your point, you literally got ahead of this, which is that because the space is so big, I couldn't possibly do everything. I can't tell a kid how to get into sports marketing. I may know a couple of things from researching, but I don't know what that space is like on a day-to-day. You do. That means that there's an opportunity for people in sports marketing, in accounting, computer engineering, tech, manufacturing, electronics, consumer electronics. There's just so much opportunity. And the reality is that the only reason why people aren't taking advantage of that opportunity might be because they just don't know about it.
Yeah.
Like, they don't realize that, okay, well, I'm not an expert in manufacturing. What could I contribute to that as an associate or as an entry-level worker at, a big manufacturing plant? The reality is you have the most to contribute because you're starting out your career now, and you could have so much of so many learnings, so many things that happen in your career, where then in a 10 to 20 year long-term, in 10 to 20 years, you could literally show your entire journey and then show this young professional, hey, this is what I learned in my entire profession. How about you take that and get on second and a half base so that you can then be incredibly successful, do what I did in 5 years, and actually contribute something amazing to this world that benefits so many people.
Right.
And maybe it's not like that's a romantic vision, but maybe you just help somebody get, now instead of taking 20 years to get to the same level you did, you help them get there in 15.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is going to make you feel so good in your heart. And two, it's back to the point of I couldn't possibly talk about manufacturing. I can't talk about sports marketing. But getting more people involved, and you said this, so I don't want to take. If you want to go and say it again, it's that the entire ecosystem benefits from each individual environment, right? Within that ecosystem, there's different parts of that food chain, different environments within that ecosystem that can contribute to a huge knowledge base that now covers all industries. Now they're not just getting forensic accountant and sports marketing and this manufacturing person. They're getting sports marketing, accounting, manufacturing, technology, industrial design, all of these different places coming from young professionals who are working within it day to day, and they have the benefit of being able to choose now based off of their education, versus beforehand, they're going into all this debt, paying all this tuition to then say, what the hell do I want to do with my life? And they didn't have those resources to figure it out before they then took on that debt.
Definitely.
So, anything to add to
that? The biggest thing with figuring that out, that's why I think really a big part of so many schools have those research parts with different companies there now. I feel like it should almost be institutionalized through an elective class that maybe you take during your last 2 years, maybe do twice, once, however many times it would be advantageous. But to me, almost every semester, just getting to work at a different company in one of those.
Could you imagine if the college education system and the education system puts out literally one elective saying call it figuring out what you want to do with the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
They bring in every week. They bring in 5 young professionals or 5 people in different stages of their career. So not just not just an associate, but an associate, a manager, a director, a partner, and a head of practice, right? If they can do it, right? That's tough to ask for those people, but I think that if you schedule it right, you could be able to do it. Get them to share each of their experiences at each level, so that they can they could even be oh, this associate's working on this, but this is how it turns out. This is what you work on once you get past that point. Once you get past manager and to director, now you're actually going and client facing, and then you're actually going and selling this type of work, and this is one of the projects that we work on right now.
Right.
And then the that's when speakers come in, but then the actual bulk of the class, the homework is you go and watch videos on people who are actually within that space. And now in week 1 you've learned industrial design. Maybe on week 2 you learn sports marketing. Week 3 you learn accounting. Week 4 you learn investment banking.
Yeah.
Right? How beneficial that would be, right? With
Definitely.
one elective, right? That's
Definitely.
How a 16-week course, you're learning about 16 different industries that actually have a monumental practical benefit.
You could almost do it in stages. Your freshman year could be that, where you're sort of getting introduced to these industries. Then maybe in the next year, with those similar types of people, you get an opportunity to do a job shadow or something like that.
Yeah.
And then maybe in year 3, you start to maybe do some kind of just basic level work, sort of an internship or whatever, during the year as an elective sort of thing, just so that you're getting real experience doing something like while in college, and it's something you can point to on your resume other than just like an academic project or whatever extracurriculars you did, or
100%.
or something like that. So I feel like almost that partnership that's already there could be expanded into the academic space.
To your point, going up to somebody at a career fair and saying, "Oh, I don't just know what's actually going on in your industry, or I didn't just research, the night before. What does your company, what's your company's mission statement?
Yeah.
I actually went through this course, and on week 3, I found this director, and he explained to me that this manufacturing role, they were able to go in and basically reassess their entire internal supply chain system, and I loved it. If you could articulate that to somebody who's giving perspective,
way to stand out at a career fair for sure.
Exactly.
Easy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any way you can take the academic experience from being more theoretical just on the books and making it more as much experiential stuff as you can fit in there in the classroom as a part of your curriculum of like what you're doing beyond just extracurriculars and other stuff that you may or may not be interested in or just may not even know exists or be able to take advantage of, I think is super advantageous because it just helps you stand out and you get to learn that much more during those early years when really the biggest thing the college can give you is opportunity to learn. So,
Yep. And to your, the first point you made, which was that, the parallel right there, right, between young professionals being told the job description and what, the romantic story about what it's like to be in that industry versus the practical, what's actually going on in it. It's in line with what you were saying about.
That's why it'd be good as a part of the program to like get the day to day, not just them coming in to talk to you, but you do job shadows. You get some just sort of on the job experiences somehow like during your college years, like while you're in school. I think it just will help people to help them make the right decision.
Theory, practical understanding, and being able to articulate that. I really think that the delta is just so giant.
They're both beneficial, but you got to have the synergy, like the intersection of both,
right,
to really to maximize the value of the whole thing.
Yeah,
for sure. Definitely.
Man, that was awesome. Good stuff. Okay, in the effort of continuing to keeping you here longer, the you just said something, which was that you're in kind of this big LinkedIn group where people are reaching out and they're asking, hey, I want to get more into maybe sports marketing side or more of the technical side, or they're more on the business side, you're more on the kind of consumer centric side.
Yeah.
I think that's such a huge tactic for people who want to actually do better with networking and opening up opportunities is find people outside of your space, not in your space, because the delta there is one, or not the delta, but the ROI of that is one, you learn about that space, you learn things about it that you wouldn't have otherwise known, which means that the next time you meet somebody in that space, you can actually speak on it. It's not you saying, oh, that's cool, oh, that's interesting, like when in reality you have no idea what they're talking about or where they're coming from. The other side of it is that if you do end up wanting to start your own thing, or if you do end up wanting to switch career paths, now you know somebody in a space that you might be interested in. Or you might meet that sixth person who's outside your specific space of sports marketing, but that sixth person that you met that was outside of it is working in a space that you want to get into.
Right.
And so those benefits are incredibly valuable, and a good reason why you should not just, because people like sticking in their own cliques, right? They like sticking within the people in the business school. They like sticking with people in the engineering school if they're an engineer, and business school if they're a business school student or an accounting student or a marketing student. People like to stick in their cliques, and I think that's the biggest missed opportunity, is that you can actually have such a bigger impact in your networking opportunities and the business opportunities in the rest of your life if you're able to meet people outside of your specific niche. Because it's the same reason why, like in high school, right? I knew the kids who were like super popular, but they would actually go and hang out with the people who were more maybe on the nerdy side, or they were more on like the punk rock side. And that kid was the most popular and had the most opportunity to go to different events and meet people because they were in so many different spaces. The same thing applies in the business world. You don't just stick to engineering because, and you could, right, and you can make a great career, but you could have so many more impacts if, as an engineer, you're meeting business people, marketing people, people in the technology space, because now you can talk on different spaces where others cannot, where other engineers can't, which means that now you're more desirable, you're more marketable, and you are way more dangerous in whichever space you choose.
Definitely any way you can expand your skill set, which is kind of the core of the grad program that I did. Like that, like any way that you can do that, it doesn't have to be through education, but just in diversifying your network, like what you mentioned, or just like doing a side job that's expanding your skill set in a certain way. I think any way you can do that, especially early on, it's only going to benefit you because the broader base you have, it opens up more opportunities and more ways to advance yourself in the business world for sure.
Right, and you mentioned this is like not getting you didn't want to get pigeonholed early on, and I think that's a great example of why you don't want to be.
Yeah.
Is that, you said, man, I want to.
There's so many ways you can change over the course of your life, and it's just like you don't want to just be stuck, working in a specific space that, you don't know what's going to be good for you a year, 2, 5, 10, 20 years from now. So
yeah,
just really giving yourself as many opportunities as you can, not only through the education path that you pursue, but just different skills that you can develop and different opportunities that you pursue, because it all leads to the final outcome of where you end up going. So any way you can kind of maximize that from a skill set perspective and an opportunities perspective is definitely advantageous.
You know what's funny is that's the whole reason why I chose to go into accounting. I knew that if I just had this base of accounting, I could open the doors to being a business analyst. I could go into a tax or audit if I wanted to. But everybody would ask me, oh, so you want to be an accountant if you're going into accounting? And it just makes sense for people to ask that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, no, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
I get all three of those reactions, because I don't know if I want to go into accounting or auditing or tax. What I do know is that that's going to be one of the many doors or two of the many doors that are open for me if I go into this, if I get this as my base.
Yeah.
Just because you go into how about this? How about all of the engineers or the physics majors that end up going into investment banking? Because they don't care about what your education was, but in a sense, but they do care about how does your mind work.
Yeah.
And when they see that you studied physics or engineering, they think that that's an incredibly valuable skill in you coming over and building models for investment banking.
Your analytical thinking is up to par.
So I think that a huge lesson that I think from us experiencing it is that don't pigeonhole yourself if you're somebody who wants all these doors open. If you know what you want, if you have been passionate about software systems, let's just call out one thing, software systems, you've been building them since you were 7 years old, 8 years old, then that makes sense. Go and pigeonhole yourself. But if you're somebody who doesn't know what they want to do, go and pick a major or pick a path that gives you the most opportunity to go and branch out, and actually go and to the point of either whether it's accounting or not taking on jobs that are going to pigeonhole you for the rest of your career.
Yeah, because that's the biggest thing that I heard in just talking to people again was just, you need to be mindful of the jobs that you take kind of will reflect the future positions that'll be open to you based on the skills and stuff that you have in your repertoire. So you just need to be mindful of what skills do you have, what types of jobs you want to have, and what types of responsibilities and skills are required for those jobs. So being mindful of where you start out can ultimately kind of lead to where you end up based on the path that you choose to take. That's why I was mindful to not take just I wanted sports, so I'm just going to do event services or something, even though that's not really what I want to do. I want to do something more analytical, leveraging sort of strategical, business knowledge, ability to see patterns in data, stuff like that, what I'm doing now. I would have never gotten this opportunity if I would have just gone into event services or something just at the beginning, just if it was the first thing that was offered to me. Yeah. So just being, I know it's really easy on from a young professional's perspective, and obviously I'll say I speak from a position of where I didn't probably feel as much pressure as someone else who's coming out with mountains of debt and things like that. So I'll definitely take that into consideration here. But as much as you can, definitely try to not just apply to any and all jobs. Apply to stuff that's that resonates with you from the skills that you're going to build, and try to have a long-term vision for these are the types of roles I want, these are the type of skills I need, and this is the entry-level job that's going to help me get there.
Fantastically put. Really well put. But to your point, let's say that you are somebody who has a lot of debt.
Right.
Okay, so take that job that gives you the most money so you can pay it quicker.
Yeah.
But recognize that you're not limited. Two things. One, remind me about the second. There's a second thing here. But the first thing is that doesn't mean you can't go and find out what your passion is.
Yeah,
on the off hours of work.
Right.
I am telling you that I do so much fucking damage. Okay, between the hours of 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. It depends on how rough it is. Sometimes it's 9 p.m. Right, if I'm working really late.
Yeah.
For my group, but between 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Yeah, you're gonna sacrifice some sleep, but I do damage. I really do try and do everything I can to make the most out of the day. The half of my day is done when I'm done with work, because then the other half of the day starts, which is me working on this other stuff on the side, because I think that the impact is just so important.
Yeah.
Like I owe it to my parents who put me in a position, like first of all for being born, right? The chances of that happening, being born into parents who actually provided me the environment, the infrastructure, and allowed me to go learn, right, in a space that put me in a position where I am now, and that I have all these opportunities. I need to be able to give back as much as possible, because I have like so much, of good feelings and appreciation for what they did for me. They put me in such a good position. I owe it to people who were not put in the same position to get them into the best position they can be to execute and actually be able to reap those benefits. But to the point of like that person who doesn't know what they want to do, okay, then take those off hours, right? That 6 p.m. and you don't have to go crazy like me. Like I'm crazy with it, right?
Yeah.
I'm bleeding out of my eyes sometimes, and I'm not getting a lot of sleep, but I love it. Like I feel like I'm living when I'm doing that stuff. I mean it. And what I'm saying is that you don't have to do it as extreme as me. Do it between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. Those 4 hours in the day to start just researching and watching videos on things that interest you. And then you can try and kind of reverse engineer how can I get into that space and pay, while also being able to pay off my loans. That is a real tactic and strategy to be able to move into a place that you actually like it, while still being able to pay off your loans because you're during the day working this job that gives you the most money to pay off the debt as quickly as possible. And then so the second thing, right, that I was talking about, I'm trying to think of it now. I think I got it. I think that whole working in your off hours, that is like the golden moments in your week. And that allows you to be able to make the most of your weekends, because once you start figuring out the things that you're passionate about by researching the things that interest you, then you can start, now you start looking forward to the weekend, not because it's an escape from your week, but because now you have more than just those 4 hours, right, between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m.
Definitely.
Now you have even more, you have the entire Saturday and Sunday to go deeper, right? And then once you actually find that thing that you love and you're passionate about and you could do for, the rest of your life, now you're starting to catch on to that thing that's going to make you happy for the rest of your life. And that's the real golden ROI of everything. Can you find something that makes you happy while still being able to sustain yourself and pay off your expenses?
Absolutely. That's a sweet spot of life right there.
Yeah. But I did appreciate you saying hey, I don't necessarily have as many loans or loans in general, but that doesn't mean that I'm not still trying to figure it out, that I'm still not trying to put myself in the best position. And these are the things that I'm trying to, pass down as things that I learned the hard way.
Definitely.
That was such a good humility move, and I get it because I've known you for a while. I know that you have that really good intention, and that's another huge thing, is that you have good intent, right? And that's better than most people that you're gonna meet within a space. If you have good intent and you use that as your guiding compass, your guiding measurement, your guiding factor, I think that is what's really going to allow you to go and try things out. Because I know putting this stuff out, that because my intent is good and because I know exactly, or I'm I don't necessarily think that people who are still trying to figure out what their passion is are going to know exactly why or what they love. But the reason why I know why I want this and why I love it is because I know that it allows me to put people in the same position that I was, or be in a better position than I was when I was starting out. Definitely. And so if I can do that, man, that gives me a good feeling. As much as that helps them out, it helps me out too, because I feel like now I'm actually starting to give back for the appreciation that I have for my parents for putting me in such a good position, Right,
definitely.
So, those are my thoughts on that. I had to throw the camera back.
No, dude, I feel that, yeah. When you got good content, you got to capture it.
I have a good partner right now, right? Because because I think that we're close, and I'm able to talk to you about stuff that I may not necessarily be able to talk to everybody about.
Yeah.
That opens up to me to actually say this is actually what's going on. I'm executing and people are seeing that, but they may not necessarily be seeing the intent that I have and why it's there.
Yeah.
The first piece of content that I ever put out on LinkedIn was an article about the greatest gift I ever received.
Yeah, I read that, yeah.
That was because that is 100% where all of my, that's my guiding compass right there, is that I was in such a good position because, my parents provided, and look, there are people who are, you may not have, you may only have one parent that, is really in your life, or you may have no parents in your life, but you have something maybe in your life that allowed you to get to the point where you are now. Yeah. And in my case, it just happens to be both my parents. because I wouldn't have life without them. And that's the reality, is that you just don't have life without your parents. So that in and of itself, I feel a huge appreciation and, almost a guilt. But the reality is that there's something out there, and because I have good intent based off of that, I'm comfortable with putting stuff out where I think that historically, and by the way, the other side of this too is my parents are the first people to tell me don't post on social media. Like how about that for like the whole like two completely opposite worlds. My parents are the reason why I post and I want to give back, and at the very same time they're the people who told me don't post on social media way early on, and which I think stopped me from doing it for so long. And their intent was good. Their intent was that stuff's going to be out there forever. Don't post something and the reality is they said don't post something stupid, but I think that it really, the way the tone came is don't post anything.
Yeah.
Because they were worried you're going to ruin the rest of your career, because an employer is going to see that and they're going to say, hey, we can't hire this person. They're a loose cannon, or they're a risk. But the reality is that they're the reason why I want to post more, because it's the good intent of it.
Definitely.
But at the same time, they're the people who also said don't post, and so that's what kept me from doing it for so long. And I think that just talking that out, like I know it in my head and I've articulated it in my head, but the funny thing is I don't articulate it verbally because I just live it, right? Like I know it. So
Yeah.
I don't feel like I have to articulate that, but that might help people who have their own, like who know that like they really appreciate their parents, but they may not necessarily appreciate something that they do.
Right.
But my parents didn't have bad intent; they had good intent. They just didn't want me to screw up my life by posting some shit, So it's funny. It's like a really interesting paradox.
Yeah.
But I think that it's something that will help a lot of people, because your parents aren't always right. But knowing that they have good intent and appreciating them regardless for what they've done and what they've provided for you, that's what's important.
Definitely, absolutely.
All right, man. I have kept you for so long. You have to catch the train.
Yeah,
right?
I'll catch one of them.
Do you want me to order an Uber, dude?